creature we currently have in our custody and is currently recovering from 4th-degree burns, a severing of an arm, and deep mutilation, was once a man, a regular man. His name was Revel Sendai. He was a boxer, fantastic boxer at that. One could compare him to Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson. Unlike most modern boxers who try to be gangsters, claim to be, or make their whole brand that they came from nothing, despite the fact they grew up in the suburbs, or challenging opponents much older than they are, and therefore much weaker than they are. Revel Sendai earned his nickname as the Maul. He was a champion among champions. He could deliver devastating blows in very quick succession without even getting as much as nicked himself. Revel the Maul Sendai had a 22-year career with 60 victories, 50 being knockouts, and 10 being decisions. However, when he began to reach his older age, he decided to use his money for different things. Instead of tigers or lavish cars or mansions, he wanted to keep his career going. So he decided to go in the underground and illegal market of kaiju parts and organs. The flesh and organs of kaiju have been extracted for many medicinal purposes. For example, they can help people heal from devastating wounds. They can help improve memory. They can help improve digestion. Also, many protein powders and extracts, along with energy drinks, can be fashioned out of kaiju organs. Revel Sendai made kaiju a staple in his diet. First, it was dashes of kaiju extract onto regular foods. Examples include integrating kaiju bone powder into his protein powder and energy drink mix, or using kaiju hormone extract on chicken wings, even using kaiju brain and liver matter in gravy. However, it didn't stop there. Soon, Revel was having kaiju parts as side portions, or having it as complete meals. So this rapidly went from steak with a side of fried kaiju ligaments into full-on chunks of kaiju on a plate. This then progressed into organs. However, kaiju, unlike most creatures on Earth, have a very interesting ability. Although they all share a common ancestor, they sure don't look like it. And if you looked at their anatomy or genealogy, you sure couldn't tell. However, kaiju have the universal ability to absorb the genetic traits from the items that they eat. Some kaiju do this more than others. For example, one species may just exhibit a color change or a change in behavior, while others will have their body be completely reshaped by their diet. This is what Revel experienced. At first, it was increases of strength, reaction speed, muscle and bone density. However, quickly the anatomy of his fingers and hands began to change. His thumb became less mobile, and his nails blackened and hardened, and grew much quicker and sharper than they used to. His skin then began darkening, and it began to also turn a purplish hue. His teeth also started to change. They became much sharper and longer. Some of them got reabsorbed entirely in favor of the tooth next to them becoming twice the size. These changes, along with increased aggression, is why he was no longer allowed to compete in any sort of combat sport, much less major leagues. As not only was he now much stronger than his opponents, although unnaturally, he was also much more aggressive. He began to keep attacking even though his opponent was knocked out. This led to several lethal injuries. He attacked refs, fans, even his own coach. He killed his own coach. Although his lawyers defended him valiantly in court, and he got away with no legal charges. He had no money, and he had no job. No one would hire him. Except the Old Dagger crime syndicate. The Old Dagger is a criminal organization with bases in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Chile, Brazil, China, Japan, India, Australia, Indonesia, and at least a dozen more countries that have yet to be confirmed by our intel. However, projections suggest that they have standings in most South American countries and likely every Asian country, and potential for making landfall in Africa. The Old Dagger deals in illegal weapons, drugs, new technologies used for domestic terrorism usually. They also tend to hire superpowered individuals and use anomalous items in their craft. They also smuggle kaiju parts, and although Sendai didn't know it, they were his dealer. They had secretly been working with him for years before the boxing world had dropped him, and they were right there to pick him back up and give him a new job. Revel Sendai worked for them for many years after that. He was strong, he was smart, and he was durable. He could get shot several times and simply get back up. Or if he was shot in the heart or head, he could just take a week's rest, something many of their men couldn't do. There was one downside to Sendai. He didn't demand a whole lot of pay, just enough to keep rent up. However, he did demand lots of food. You see, although kaiju is very, very nutritious, although it would be ill-advised, one kaiju corpse could feed thousands of people, with only fractions of the same amount of meat it would take to feed them with goats, chickens, or cows. However, that's besides the point. Thing is, his body had also adapted some of the kaiju's biology. He needed more energy. He needed more kaiju parts. And see, this is normally fine for kaijus and their extreme biology, as there is an entire ecosystem with billions of years of adaptations, specifically meant for the kaiju. However, Revel was a man with the demands, both mentally and calorically, of a kaiju. The Old Dagger needed to keep him going on missions, or he would go stir crazy and begin attacking their other employees. They needed to keep feeding him kaiju parts. It was insane how much his new biology demanded, energetically speaking. It was cheaper to simply smuggle parts of a dead kaiju, either scavenged or hunted, and feed it to Revel, than to feed him the amount of chickens, or goats, or cows he would need to consume. Eventually, they started feeding him people, as it was a quick way to get rid of a body, and it kept their monster at bay. His skin turned more purple, his hands almost lizard-like, his thumbs were no longer opposable, and his feet looked more like a turtle's than a man's. His bone density and muscle density had increased rapidly. The amount of body fat he had decreased rapidly. And the amount of food he needed had almost quintupled. However, his intelligence began to dip. He wouldn't follow orders correctly. Sometimes he wouldn't follow orders at all. Occasionally, he would just lash out against whatever shot caller was telling him who to kill, and simply kill him. He was like a nuclear weapon. The Old Dagger could send him in, but he would kill and destroy everyone and everything. So they stopped using him. Although eventually, his kaiju instincts, his newfound desire to hunt and kill and consume, had quite literally consumed him. That night, June the 14th, 2024, Revel Sendai went on a rampage. His new instincts and his previous knowledge of back when he was a man drove him to a bar. This bar is now shut down, and it was known as the Drunken Goose. The Drunken Goose was a money laundering scheme for the Old Dagger. However, when their monster walked in there, it became a slaughterhouse. An estimated 32 people were killed that evening, and it is estimated because many of these people were left as paste, consumed in their entirety by Revel. Of the 32, 20 were employees of the Old Dagger, and 12 were civilians who had nothing to do with Revel or the Old Dagger, but he killed them anyways, and he ate them. One of the deaths from the Old Dagger is one of their super-powered henchmen called the Buggernaut. The working theory is that the Buggernaut was a man born with the genetic defect of looking like a beetle. He also had the strength and durability of a beetle. Did, until Revel punched a hole through his chest. This was gathered from security footage. Revel was then seen consuming the Buggernaut almost in its entirety, and then throwing the exoskeleton pretty much all over the floor. Revel then walked outside the drunken goose, and after that we're not sure what happened. However, there was about a 15-minute gap till our agents arrived on the scene, and Revel was found dismembered and burned to bits. Revel was missing his left arm, had several exposed bones and deep lacerations almost cutting down to the bone, a large bite mark, and the left side of his body being burned. Also, much of the skin on his face was burned away completely, down to the bone. He'd also lost almost 95% of his blood. He was then taken by the Legion and put in a top security medical facility, where he's being monitored and is hopefully being brought back to health. We hope that he can be of use to us in taking out the Old Dagger, or at the very least, figuring out why they find all of the people with superpowers before we do. We'll continue to monitor. It's been 2 weeks since we have picked up Revel and put him in our facility. The skin on his face has begun to grow back, and his body's begun to put itself back together. He's still mostly delirious, although he has bouts of consciousness where he speaks about how he has wasted his life, and how he's turned himself into a monster and wishes to do good again. We'll continue to monitor. It has been a second 2 weeks since we have captured Revel. He still calls himself the Maw, despite the fact that's not his legal name. We asked him who Revel Sendai was, and he looked at us confused. However, his body has regenerated quite nicely. Many of the lacerations are now just small scars that seem to be fading. His left arm seems to be regenerating as the humerus has completely grown back, and much of the muscle around it has also grown back. He still occasionally has nightmares about the incident, and when asked about it, he claims a young boy and a dragon attacked him. We'll continue to monitor. Upon further investigation of the scene, not only were there buckets of blood coming from Revel the Maw Sendai, there was a small puddle of blood that did not belong to Revel. Upon genetic testing, it seemed to belong to a very, very strange bearded dragon. And there was also a torn piece of cloth from a black sweater from the Kaini brand. Perhaps we should look into his young boy and dragon story. We'll continue to monitor.